afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's virtual plant clinic. I'm just going to get us started with a few notes as always. So if you are a regular attendee at these classes, as always, thank you for joining us and just bear with me for the next couple of minutes. For those of you who have not attended our virtual plant clinic before, this is a Zoom webinar rather than a Zoom meeting. And so we can't actually speak to you during this class, but we do want to take your questions. So you'll open up your Zoom menu. If you have questions during the class, type your question into that Q&A box, and I'll be monitoring during the class. Today is a little bit different because we have a special guest joining us today who I'll let David introduce in just a moment. But for any of you all, again, who are not familiar with this class, we are recording as usual. So if you have to leave early for any reason, you can always leave, and then the recording will be available tomorrow, usually within about 24 hours following the end of the class. I am opening up the chat right now. If anybody has any technical issues, please feel free to send those to me, and I'll be happy to assist in any way that I can. David, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys get started, and I will mute my microphone.
Excellent. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. I'm particularly excited about today because we're trying a different format. And I've got a very good friend and a respected professional in the industry, Geoff Rinehart, joining us, where he's a lecturer at the University of Maryland. Geoff and I, he probably doesn't even remember this, but our first contact with each other was years ago at the, make sure I get this right, at the National Arboretum, when they had a display talking about the grass family and how wonderful and diverse and how important this family of plants was to us. And then from there, as his career progressed and that project came to an end, moved to the University of Maryland, where he teaches and trains people that are going into the landscape and lawn care industry. So he's definitely a wealth of knowledge and information, experienced educator. And I'm just, Geoff, well, we reconnected a little bit at a professional field day this summer. And I'm so glad that you're here to share all that knowledge and experience with us today. So I'm kind of in a supporting role, keep me here in the background, keep Geoff on track. You know, he gets a little forgetful or something like that. I can come to his rescue, but seriously, I think you're in for a treat today as Geoff tries to tell us the steps we need to take to get our lawns looking good, the importance of the timing, and of course, we want to hear from you the questions. So look forward to your participation in all this as well. So with that, I am just handing it over to our guest, Geoff Rinehart, and I'm just going to be back in the background, keeping my mouth shut, maybe.
Thank you so much, David, and thank you to Merrifield for the invitation to present this webinar. As David alluded to with the questions, really that's what makes this such a great session. So I think we've got about a half an hour for presentation, and then time after that for question and answer. And Sally, thanks for curating those questions. Feel free to write in questions as they come in, and Sally feels like it's something to bring up at the time, she will, and if not, we'll address those questions at the very end. But it's been a tough summer for everybody, and as David and I were speaking last month at an industry event, he mentioned, gosh, it would be great to talk about lawn renovation and lawn rejuvenation with the hot summer we've had, with the very dry conditions we had during the first half of summer especially. And it's just been a really stressful summer. So this is a really appropriate time to be talking about and thinking about lawn restoration within our area. So we think about some of the, root causes of turf grass loss. And certainly this year we had a lot of drought damage, but we can also look at, more chronic issues like poor soil conditions, extreme environmental stresses, perhaps pest damage, just kind of looking at our broader standpoint. I think a lot of this year was heat and drought, but also things like excessive shade. One side note on shade is that, a lot of older houses, maybe that turf grass was planted in the sun 20 years ago, and now you've got more shade and a more appropriate, another alternative ground cover or alternative planting might be appropriate for that shade because turf grass can't take too much shade before you're probably choosing another planting um, regime. So, you also think about improper cultural practices. Those can be reasons for turf grass loss as well. And then certainly thinking about traffic, and we run into this as sports field and golf professionals with traffic and things like that. So, but we're going to focus on, lawn rejuvenation. And I chose this photo. This was from my colleague Mark Schlossberg here in Maryland. He's a landscaper, but he had helped me with a few photos as I wrote an article for our IPM alert a few weeks ago. And I think this is pretty common from what people are seeing around the region. And so I put the caption lawn rejuvenation here with this one. If you've got a situation where you lost a lot of grass due to the drought and the heat, but otherwise you're in pretty good shape, i.e., you don't have a lot of weeds, the soil that you have is pretty good, the grading that you have is pretty good. I think of that more as a lawn rejuvenation as opposed to a full-scale renovation. And so today I'll talk a little bit about both, but I think when we were thinking about this webinar, we were really thinking about lawn rejuvenation and the steps to go about to clear out this dead debris and then reseed with improved cultivars. And this is a perfect time to be doing that. I'll contrast that with lawn renovation when you have more of a mess of a lawn, so to speak. The lawn's, 30-40% weeds. You might have a lot of thatch. The lawn might be extensively damaged by insects or disease, or, kind of like catch all at the bottom here. The lawn is an otherwise unsalvageable mess. So hopefully that's not you. Hopefully you're just looking at a rejuvenation this fall, but I wanted to mention full-scale renovation as well. So we think about establishment timing and that seeding window for cool season grasses. Tall fescue is a predominant grass and lawns in our area. Right now is our prime time to do that. So I would say anywhere from now until about the beginning of October. And while the weather can be in October can be pretty mild, we want to make sure that we do it early enough so that that new grass gets established before it goes into its first winter here. So late summer to early fall is a great time to do it. If you have zoysia grass that succumbed to drought stress this year, then you're looking at trying to wait till next spring to really do anything because it's way too late to get any zoysia grass established or kind of recovering at this point in the year. So just want to cover really quick some of our common lawn grasses here in the Mid-Atlantic. And as I mentioned, a lot of people have tall fescue. In particular, I suggest people look for turf-type tall fescues. There's been a lot of fescue breeding over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And instead of this big, wide, horse leaf blade that we used to have with Kentucky 31 tall fescue, there's a lot of turf-type tall fescues that have a finer leaf blade that do well in lawn environments. And remember, this is a bunch-type grass, so it doesn't spread out much. It grows and then it tillers, but it becomes bigger, but not very quickly. It doesn't spread out. And so with any type of substantial damage to this, we're looking at trying to reseed and augment those plants for that area to create better density. And so I know this summer has been difficult, but really overseeding during the fall as a regular practice is pretty helpful to maintaining density for turf-type tall fescue. Another note here, it's best adapted for sunny areas. Take a little bit of shade, but really not very much. Fine fescue is what we would find in our shady mix. And so this is a finer leaf blade. So you might have a mix of both depending upon the sun and shade that you find on your property. And then just a quick mention to zoysia grass. Again, this is a warm season grass. with adequate water, it probably fared very well this summer with all of the heat. Although I did see in areas that weren't irrigated, I did see some zoysia grass drought stress. Um, and typically it's more drought tolerant, but we really had a tough go of it during the first half of summer into a bit of July. But this is a warm season grass. This is going to go off color dormant once we get into frost season at the end of October. So there's an overview of the grasses we have here. And then thinking about kind of site preparation, more for a renovation, soil testing is always good to do about every 3 years or so. And if you haven't done it in a while and you're on the brink of rejuvenating or renovating your lawn, it's good to do a soil test so that you know what the nutrient status is and what the pH status is of that soil. And then really kind of clearing of debris is the next stage. So we're trying to clear out all of the if we're rejuvenating, we're clearing out all that dead leaf tissue. Um, if we've got an unsalvageable mess and we're renovating, we need to do some weed control. And then based on the soil test, we can lime if the pH is too low, or try to incorporate some soil amendments like compost, and then go about the grading, first the rough grading and then final grading. Again, if you're only looking at a rejuvenation, then you're probably skipping this step with the grading, and you don't need to do much grading if you've already got a good grade and you're just augmenting what's already there. And then seeding and then starter fertilizer starter fertilizer and then seeding. So let's walk through some of these steps. But I did want to mention uh, varieties and recommended varieties. So both I and my colleagues at Virginia Tech meet every year in the spring, and we look at the last year's data with regards to our variety trials, and we update the Maryland, Virginia list. So pretty much all the varieties that are on the Maryland list should be on the Virginia list. And we talk about, here's a couple screenshots of our turf type tall fescues. For those folks, I figured most people on the call are probably in Virginia. Dr. Goatley just published this in the last few weeks. So this is the 24-25 Virginia turfgrass variety recommendations. So if you're not familiar with these are available online, and they give lists. I'll go back to the lists here, but they give lists of different cultivars that have done well in our variety trials, both in Virginia and Maryland, and on our recommendation list. So I know that David, we were chatting earlier. I know Merrifield strives to offer these varieties on the recommended list. I know a lot of our professional distributors strive to offer the varieties on the recommended list. And in fact, to be certified sod within Maryland or Virginia, those sod growers need to be growing varieties that are on this list. So we've done that testing and evaluation here locally and regionally to try to identify the strongest varieties, whether that be persistence, disease tolerance, drought tolerance, to be able to identify this for both professionals and the general public. So now, if you're looking at rejuvenating your lawn, now is a great time to go find some of these improved varieties and use those improved varieties with your seeding. So, in fact, if you can find certified seed, that's even better. So if you can find varieties that are that have blue tag certified seed has, practically no crop seed or weed seed. So you're getting a very clean seed. I know that a lot of our distributors around here do a very good job with cleaning their seed so that you don't have a bunch of weed seed. And, a lot of places like Merrifield and the professional distributors carry very high quality seed. So being able to invest a few dollars upfront on better varieties and very high quality seed, is going to pay dividends in the long run. So let's look at this again, thinking about testing the soil, rough grading, liming if we need to. If we're doing a renovation, we're trying to incorporate 10 to 15% compost into the soil, and that compost is helpful for water retention, for nutrient retention with soil tilth. And it's a good time to do it if you're doing a full-scale renovation. So let's take a look at this. If you're renovating um, um, and working in this compost, you're mowing as short as possible, then you're dethatching. And I've got a few photos of this to kind of follow up. You're dethatching, or if you're keeping that same grade, or if you're not, you're rototilling and then working in 10 to 15% compost, and then lime as well if that is needed based on the soil test recommendations. After that, you're going through and grading and leveling this. Oftentimes, you'll need some supplemental topsoil to help with that. You can run a roller to help roll this out to a smooth surface. And then you're applying a preceding starter fertilizer app based on the soil test. I'll talk about a little bit more about seed rates a little bit later on. So for lawn rejuvenation, we don't have to go through quite as many steps. Basically, we're mowing as low as possible, try to clear out all of that dead plant debris and dethatch. This is also a good time to aerify if your soil, if now the soil moisture is adequate. And then looking at this preceding starter fertilizer. So if you're just rejuvenating as opposed to renovating, you can skip some of these steps as you're not really changing the grade. So let's look at some photos of this. I'm trying to advance here, and running into a little trouble with advancing. Okay, so we're going through we're after we seed, we're going through the top dress with compost to reduce water evaporation, help with water retention in the seed bed, and then we're watering lightly and frequently. We want to keep that soil surface moist for 10 to 14 days. Usually turf type tall fescue will germinate in about 7 to 10 days, but we want to keep that surface moist for about 10 to 14 days. So as you think about this, there's a lot of planning that goes into it with thinking, okay, getting the materials together that I need to, whether that be a thatcher, whether that being a plan for post-seeding irrigation. Am I going to get a timer, or do I have, am I going to be at home to be able to turn that water on to keep that seed damp for 10 to 14 days? So if we think about that's an overview, but if we get more in depth with this, looking at soil testing, I think a lot of people on this call are pretty familiar with soil testing, but if you haven't done it in the last 3 years, this is a good opportunity to do that, and then add in nutrients according to that soil test. If you're doing a full-scale renovation where you've got a lot of weeds and a lot of kind of a mishmash that you're really not happy with, you're looking at making a non-selective application. So this would be something glyphosate-based or glufosinate-based, most likely. And that's going to take, you want to do that about 14 to 21 days prior to seeding. If you need to change the grade or you want to incorporate compost, you're looking at rototilling and then incorporating that compost at 10 to 15% volume to volume. If you're not looking at rototilling and changing the grade or incorporating compost, you can mow with your regular lawnmower as low as it will go, and then rake the thatch out either by hand or with a dethatching machine, and then go about your seeding after that. But really a key thing here is to get all of that dead debris up and out of there so that you have good seed to soil contact. So there I am with a project of several years ago, rototilling. We had this area non-selectively controlled, and then went through with the rototiller before smoothing it back out, um, and changing some things with that grade. Um, Based on your soil test, you will get a lime recommendation if you need lime. And so if you're undergoing a full renovation, this is a great time to incorporate that lime into the soil. You can also add lime afterwards, if you have an existing lawn, but it's just easier to get that lime into the soil during a full-scale renovation. So, depending on the degree of your renovation, you're either rototilling or, again, for rejuvenation, you might be just aerifying. Example of aerification holes here, where you're pulling out small little plugs and creating little areas where the air can get down into the soil a little bit more efficiently. Or you're going through and dethatching and kind of removing all of that dead thatch debris to help create good seed to soil contact for that seeding. So, apologize, I'm maybe a little out of order here, but once you get that, surface leveled and fine graded and ready for planting, you want to put down a starter fertilizer. And typically a starter fertilizer is going to be in a ratio such as 1:1. So a lot of times, or approximately that. So the big thing here is that that second number, which refers to the phosphorus, is going to be higher than the other two numbers. First number referring to nitrogen, third number referring to potassium. And usually I recommend folks put this down at half a pound of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet with this starter fertilizer. 1 pound's a little bit much, but half a pound is usually pretty good. Then you can add maybe just a little bit more if you need to in the following 3 to 4 weeks. And it's always good to apply that fertilizer in two directions to ensure better uniformity. Again, sorry if these are just a smidge out of order, but this is a picture of me at the Arboretum going through and mowing low, and you can see here I'm trying to get all of that leaf debris up, all those dead leaves up, to try to create a better opportunity for the seed to drop down to that soil surface. And then going through with the dethatcher, the dethatcher will dig in. If you set it low enough, you can almost use this as a mini tiller, where you're really kind of digging into the surface, half an inch, maybe a little bit more, and creating these, bringing the thatch out and then creating these lines that, where the seed can really thrive and you can have good seed soil contact and the rest of it. So if you take a closer look at a thatcher, this is what it looks like. It's got these, sometimes it's called vertical mowing. Sometimes you hear the term power rake. I think I've been to rental stores where they called this a power rake. And it basically has these blades that spin vertically, and you can set this at different depths as it goes into the soil. As I mentioned, aerifying is another technique you can use for rejuvenation as well. So even if you're not, even if you don't have a lot of stress on the turf, being able to do this on a regular basis, usually in the fall, is very good. You're able to increase oxygen levels in the soil. And also, as you're reseeding, it creates a little niche area for that seed to really thrive. So even if your lawn is in pretty good shape, aerifying now in the early fall is a good recommendation to be able to help alleviate some compaction and help that soil. Okay, looking at some of our seeding rates here. So within the Maryland Master Gardener's Handbook, looking at turf type tall fescue, if you've got a brand new lawn, it's a brand new renovation, you're looking at seeding at about 6 to 8 pounds of seed per 1,000 square feet. If you're just overseeding, just as a regular practice in the fall, 3 to 4 pounds is about right. Now, if you're looking at a lawn rejuvenation, I would probably inch up more towards that, closer to that 6 pounds, depending on how damaged your lawn is from the drought and the heat. So these are, again, kind of recommendations. And you're tempted to say, gosh, if 8 pounds is good, then isn't 12 pounds even better? But you get to a certain point, much beyond 8 pounds, where the seeds are too crowded. And so just like if you have too many people crowded into a room, they might survive, but they're not going to thrive. And we want to be putting seed down at a rate where those seeds are going to have the space they need, access to nutrients and water that they need to really thrive. So again, tall fescue, 6 to 8 pounds. I don't know that we have too many folks with Kentucky bluegrass lawns in the DC area here. You see a couple, high end, places, stadiums, athletic fields, but tall fescue is pretty much what we have here for the most part. And then fine fescue, a little bit lower rate there. You can see here going through with the drop spreader after this full renovation area has been prepped. And notice with the drop spreader, I'm overlapping just a little bit over my wheel tracks to get even coverage with that drop spreader. And then finally going through and looking at this happens to be a photo from a compost and corporation study, but I wanted to put it up here to talk about putting compost on top of the seed as a top dressing. So after you seed, you're looking at keeping that seed damp for 10 to 14 days, and being able to have a cover is helpful for doing that. So compost is really helpful with that. If anybody's used biosolids from the Bloom facility in DC, but that can be used too. Straw can be used, but a lot of times we find weed seeds in straw, and it's kind of messy. Compost you can put out with the compost roller, or just kind of by hand on smaller areas, and it's really effective for keeping that moisture on the surface so that you don't have to water as much. Plus, you have that compost breaking down and going into the soil over time, which is a benefit to that soil as well. So looking at some of our post planting culture, irrigation, we want to be looking at light and frequent applications to keep that seed damp. We don't have any roots, so we don't need to water deeply at this point, but just light and frequent to keep that damp. Once it starts growing, we're looking at mowing for our first time using the 1/3 rule. So if we're going to be targeting mowing tall fescue at about 3 inches, maybe a little bit more, between 3 and 3.5, you're probably mowing when that grass gets to about 3.5 or 4 inches. I think during the fall you can go just a little bit lower because we have cooler temperatures, but certainly you want to be in that 3 to 3.5 inch range during the summer. And then as you're establishing this fertilization wise, remember that plant doesn't have much in the way of roots. So, maybe making a light application at 0.5 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 via starter fertilizer at seeding, and then following that up with another 0.5, 3 to 5 weeks down the road will be important. Hopefully you won't have too many broadleaf weeds. This is a great time to be able to do this, but for a lot of broadleaf weed products on the label, they kind of outline when you can apply those, and it's typically after the first mowing. If you're doing sodding, it's a little bit easier. You're watering to keep those plants alive, and then trying to get it to root in, and then following it up with fertilizer soon after sodding. So with that, David, I think I was able to kind of run through that in a half hour. Be happy to take comments, questions from everybody. So again, thank you for the invitation and appreciate being here today.
Thank you so much, Geoff. Well, we've had questions coming in on a variety of topics, so I will just go ahead and get started. And a quick reminder to everybody, please, of course, send in your questions as you have them. We will go, hope, for as long as we can, if y'all are able to stay until 3:30. And then for any questions that we can't get to, of course, as always, you all are welcome to follow up with us at the plant clinic. David is happy to assist. So with that noted, I will launch into questions. Our first one is from Liz. The lawn along both sides of our front walkway, about 2 to 3 inches, dies each summer. That lawn is flat towards the west in strong afternoon sun. A couple of years ago, we had this section totally removed and redone, but that didn't help. Could heat absorption by the flagstone walkway be causing the problem? Is there anything we can do?
Yeah, it sounds like an issue with it being really close to that hardscape and very hot hardscape if it's got a southern exposure and you're looking at the sun. So I kind of, yeah, it's a tough spot for sure. I kind of look at, trying to do what you can to reduce stress. So that's mowing higher, maybe trying to get out there and pinpoint watering. Yeah, that's about all you can do. I mean, there's a lot of places within this suburban environment. Think about these sidewalk strips that are, foot or foot and a half wide, and that's, always get walked on. Similar type of stress condition. Do what you can to raise that mowing height and maybe pinpoint your watering. But other than that, it's tough,
Yeah,
tough
so
situation.
maybe a heat issue.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that because I hear that also. I know you did like a total renovation, but hopefully that involved doing good soil preparation. Because I think a lot of what Geoff had talked about around here is just compacted, miserable soil, and the grass doesn't have an opportunity to develop a deep root system in there. So putting the extra effort into soil preparation, I can improve your results in a situation like that also.
Okay.
The other thing I thought of too is if you try to do a little bit of a mini air fine right along there so that you have the water being able to move down and not kind of, rolling off. So if you're able to take a pitchfork or something and kind of pitchfork in those problem areas and really get that air moving, that'll help the water to infiltrate into the soil a little bit better too. So all of those are factors.
Okay. All right. Lots of good ideas. Okay, we have a couple of questions about the fescue and seed distributors and recommendations. So I'll go through I think we have two. I feel like I'm missing one. If I find it, I'll add that one in. Who are the professional tall fescue seed distributors is the first question. The second question is, how do we find if the seed has that blue seal? Can you
Yeah,
talk a little
so
bit about that?
sure, yeah. So finding seed is not always easy. Again, I'll come back to Merrifield, David. You all have done a tremendous job over the years of trying to really stay up to date with your blends and mixes and using the recommended varieties. So, I would say Merrifield is a wonderful source for quality seed that's, on the list there. Our professional groups, include places like Chesapeake Valley Seed, Newsom Seed, Site One sells seed as well. So they're not, you as a homeowner can walk in there. They're not super customer friendly. That's part of the deal with the professionals, but you would need to call them and ask them if they have certified seeds. So that blue tag that I showed you is an indication of certified seed. So even if you can't find certified seed, a lot of times if you find and certified just kind of refers to how well it's been cleaned. It has basically no weed seeds, no crop seeds. But finding those varieties that are on the list are probably the most important, and certified is a close second to important. So
Yeah.
those are some sources. But again, I'll iterate. Merrifield has done a great job with their seed sourcing and keeping up to date with their blends and mixes.
Yeah. But I just kind of want to elaborate on that a little bit. What you find on every seed pack, it just isn't unique to Merrifield, but on the back, it's required by law. The label on here specifies what's in the back. So what Geoff is talking about is we work with seed producers in Oregon and have them blend this to our specifications. So a lot of what you're hearing today, not all of us have time to do it. I feel like that's one of the things that we do for you at Merrifield. We're looking at those results. We're working with contractors and blending them together. So for example, this is a mix of tall fescue. It's about, usually it runs from like 95% tall fescue. We bend a little bit of bluegrass in there. So we're mixing and blending them for different environments, putting in there and following these test results are there. So it's not like you can just walk in and say, I want a particular variety or something. The other thing I want to add to this is we just, to spare you the time, we don't sell certified seed. We have done that in the past, but what happens is certified seed goes at a premium cost.
Yeah.
Because you actually have to pay for the inspection services to get that blue tag on here. And then that tends to elevate the cost on it. That's great. I'm not, if you want that, that's a great thing. But what we found is most of our consumers didn't want to pay that additional expense. So you won't find certified seed, but you will find our blends are mixed with these Virginia and Maryland recommended varieties. And then we'll do like this is the tall fescue, which I 100% agree with. That's what most of us are going to be planting. But I was hoping you might, oh yeah, and I'll just say, the shady, like we talked about, these are the fine fescues. I noticed you didn't talk too much about bluegrass or ryegrass, and I think probably good reason, but I just kind of figure I want you to elaborate on that just a minute. Of where they may or may not fit into our programs.
Right. So bluegrass is more disease prone than tall fescue in our area for home lawns. Plus, it really needs a bit more fertilizer. So we look at a lot of our fescues in that 2 to 3 pounds per thousand of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per year. Bluegrass really needs 3 to 5 pounds. So you're looking at increased fertility for it to look better. You're looking at the fact that it goes into drought dormancy quicker than tall fescue. So it's not as drought tolerant and from that perspective. And then it's more prone to diseases. So while it is a more of a higher premium grass, it really, in our area, it's a tough environment. You go another 150 miles north up into Pennsylvania, and it grows fine. But here in the DC area, it's just tough. So we usually don't recommend using it except for maybe in mixes with tall fescue at maybe 5 or 10%. And that the reason for that is that it helps, it spreads by rhizomes, underground runners. So you are able to get that sod to kind of knit together a little bit better. And it offers some recuperative capacity that tall fescue does not. Ryegrass is even more prone to disease here in the summer. And so we really don't recommend, at least at University of Maryland, we really don't recommend using perennial ryegrass in home lawns at all. I suppose in an absolute emergency, it'll germinate in a little bit cooler temperatures, but then you're kind of stuck with it, and you're stuck with something that's going to be more disease prone and not very drought tolerant. So it's not a good option in our area.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. But I just sort of we try to make all this available to you, alert you the pros and cons, and also people that might want a Kentucky bluegrass. I kind of describe it as kind of like having a pet. It's like if that's what you want, there's going to be a higher level of commitment that goes to it. So you can have it, but it's going to require a much higher level of care and input to go to it.
Usually in this area, you see it at the major league ballparks. You'll see it at the Kennedy Lawn if you go over to Arlington National Cemetery. You'll see it on some sports fields. But remember, all of those spaces have people who are able to care for the grass more than the typical homeowner.
And real quick, Sally, I'm gonna have one question for Geoff, and
Yeah.
then I'll sit back and let everybody else have their turn. I know when I was involved in doing some of these trials and stuff, we loved a drought year like this. It's like putting our tests under maximum possible stress, which of course is not what you want to do at home, but that gave us really a chance to see how things held up under these kind of extreme conditions. And I thought, Geoff, maybe just speak to given the summer that we just came through, what are your kind of your guidelines or thoughts in regards to watering?
Yeah. So I will say that it's tough to catch up on watering. And so with watering, there's a couple early signs that we saw back in maybe early June. And so what will happen with the grass is that you'll notice your footprints don't bounce back as quickly. So that plant doesn't have the water in it to be able to bounce back. Those footprints will just linger in the lawn. And this is before you see it go to brown. The other thing is that the leaves will become more narrow. So the plant is trying to conserve water that it's transpiring by decreasing its surface area and exposure to the environment around it. So if you're careful to make these observations, and this occurred on a lot of our lawns back in like the second week in June or so, if you're careful to make those observations, you can start watering then. And so with the watering, usually no more than about an inch per week for watering, and we try to separate that out into two or three waterings per week. So you want to water deeply for an established lawn area and then let it dry out for a day or two and then water again. If you're watering every day, you're not really getting you're keeping that area too damp to encourage disease organisms, fungus that can be thriving in warm, humid, damp conditions. But you're also not getting that water all the way down to the roots that are further down into the soil. So, 1 inch per week, every other day, kind of deeply and frequently for an established lawn. And I'll contrast that with a new lawn. It's just a little bit, but more frequently, several times a day to get that seed up and going. So, it is tough once you're kind of behind on watering, and a lot of us kind of maybe got to that point in July where it's going to be a lot for it to come back, or the grass might be just flat out dead at that point. That's the situation that I think a lot of us are facing.
All right. Let's see. Okay, next question. Um, do you all have any experience with geese causing damage to lawns? Like they have an infestation of geese, which I can sympathize with. Our condo has the same thing. But do y'all have any experience with that or any recommendations for how to keep geese from destroying lawns?
Yeah, this is a tough one. So this is a somewhat common issue at golf courses, because you have, a lot of grassy area and you have an irrigation pond or two. And some golf courses have a dog that kind of chases a geese off. Now, so it's an option for maybe some people. The geese won't be landing if you have a dog running around, but obviously your dog's not out there all the time. So other than that, just guys trying to be careful to pick up all the goose droppings and before they burn the grass, but that's pretty tedious too. So no easy answer on that one. I mean, you could also put up, there's deterrents, that you can put up, but that's depends what decor you want for your yard. So yeah,
Okay.
no easy answer for that.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll just add, there are goose repellents and we sell them, but again, I'd want to make sure we have an inventory because it's kind of a specialty thing. I don't look at that as really a solution because I don't know if you've had experience, Geoff, but our clients said they work, but something that's like another constant maintenance thing, like you have to apply them at least once a week or following
Right.
rainfall.
Because they'll wash off.
Yeah, they're non-toxic and all that, but it's kind of like, okay, it
Right.
works as long as you're doing it. The minute you kind of stop applying it, you're back where you started. So it's not an ideal answer, but might give you a little short-term relief.
Yeah, same thing with the deer repellents. I mean, they're natural based oftentimes, but they do degrade in the rain.
Mhm. Okay. No easy solutions for the geese. All right. Next question. I have a lot of bare patches, most of the topsoil scraped off years ago. We laid sod, but most didn't pick up. I'm assuming because there was no topsoil. Um, do I add topsoil now and sow seed over it, or do I seed now and it's, I think the question is, or then do I add seed and then topsoil?
So if you've got a layer of dead sod, you've got to deal with that layer somehow. You can't just put topsoil on top of that and then throw seed on top of that, because what will happen is those roots will hit that sod layer and then really not be able to go through it. And water the same way. So you typically do not want that type of layer in your lawn. So what I would do in that situation is, if I've got that dead sod and I don't have many weeds, I'm okay with the grade, I would get a dethatcher and dethatch two or three different directions, just absolutely beat that up. And then you kind of open up that soil surface and then seed on top of that. But the key is, whatever you do mechanically, you want to make sure that you ameliorate or try to eliminate that layer, because that layer is going to cause you headaches later on, especially with soil situation that wasn't prepared well to begin with. So, I mean, ideally, you'd go through and rototill in 10 to 15% volume compost. I realize that's quite a project for some people. So, at the very least, you want to, get rid of that sod layer by, hard raking, dethatching.
Okay. All righty. Next question. This is about aeration. And I may not be totally understanding this question, but what about aeration timing for rejuvenation? What type of earshot do you recommend for a small, medium-sized lawn? This is about a tennis court size.
The time of what shot?
Earshot? I'm not sure if that might be a typo or something that I'm misunderstanding. I don't know all
Um,
that much about lawns.
yeah, I'm not familiar with that term within this context. Yeah, if you're looking at rejuvenation again, I kind of get back to, airifying is good. I feel like thatching, you have more of an opportunity to affect a greater surface area than you do just airifying, and so that's why I kind of emphasized using the thatcher or power rake. Um, and I'm not sure what they were getting at with that term earshot within this context.
Okay.
The
Well,
idea again is that you want to take out all of that dead debris and have good seed to soil contact. So let me see if I can, yeah, like, something like this. I had a non-selective control on this, but going through, really trying to get all of this out of there so that I'm planting into soil, not old plant debris.
okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then of course, please send us if you have any other questions you want to ask, then we can address those. All right, next question. What about, okay, this is about fertilizer and lime. Do you all have any concerns about the contamination of groundwater or water that flows in, like runoff flowing into our creeks and local bodies of water?
So fertilizer, when used at the right rate, at the right time, and make sure that it's off of the sidewalk, off of the street, off of the driveway, off of hard surfaces. If it's in the planting material, if it's in the lawn at the right rate at the right time, there's a lot of research that says that it gets used by those plants. I think a lot of the issues come when people don't people don't sweep off their sidewalk, people don't sweep off their driveway, people don't sweep off the street, then that's going straight to the storm drain. Or if you've got a steep slope on your way down to a pond or lake and it's mowed all the way down and it runs off the surface and into the lake, that's an issue. But for the typical lawn, right rate, right time. So we look at fertilizing, about I think the regulation in Virginia, it is in Maryland, is 0.9 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. So doing a whole nother talk on fertilizer calculations, but you want to make sure that that's 0.9 pounds, and then you'll hopefully be doing that twice, once in September, once in October. Again, make sure you sweep off hard surfaces.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm just jump in real quick on that because again, that's my job. I guess not. I'm not trying to sell too hard, but I want to say so. All this stuff, I know a lot of times we're talking about 0.9 pounds per 1,000 square feet. Twice a year, blah blah blah. We do that for you. That's kind of where my role steps in. So like when you're looking at our custom blended fertilizers like Merrifield Premium, Merrifield Select, the premium is the zero phosphorus formula, and the phosphorus is taken out of there as a way to try to protect water resources. The Select is your starter fertilizer, which does have phosphorus. And we also, the application rates are set to fall within these standards. And we are using what we call 50% slow release nitrogen to reduce the runoff. So in response to the caller's question there, I want to say, yes, it is a concern, a valid concern. It is very much regulated by the states, and we're conscientious in trying to make sure we interpret, and all that stuff is on there. So you don't necessarily have to know all this stuff. It's good that you're aware of it. But if that's a part of what I feel like my job and others here at Merrifield is to make sure that we provide that in an easy way for you to use.
Mm-hmm.
That makes a lot of sense. All right.
Yep.
Next question. Do you have recommendations for selective weed control products when you're rejuvenating the lawn?
So, yeah, and again, I want to caveat that a lot of these selective broadleaf weed control products, you need to wait until you're mowing at least once or twice, read the product label to be able to engage with that. But there's a lot of and you all probably sell a few of these, but there's products with carfentrazone ethyl, which is kind of a reduced risk active ingredient. So something like Speed Zone is the trade name for that on the professional level. So that's a good product for selective broadleaf control. And probably one that I would recommend for the average homeowner. And I don't know, you all probably have a homeowner version of that, but that active ingredient is carfentrazone ethyl.
We do have that available, but again, we would walk you through all this step by step because a part of what I think Geoff's saying, like if you were to spray those broadleaf weeds, it has a 2-week wait time before you're able to do your seeding.
Mm-hmm.
Or we want your new grass to grow in, get time for its roots to be established. So we're going to be conservative, say second or third mowing, then we can apply it. So you don't want to use that on newly established lawn. But we have that. One other little thing, Geoff, just because I thought it might be of interest. So this is it's a pre-emergent herbicide, a weed preventer that can be used at the same time as seeding. It's traditionally used in commercial golf course management. The active ingredient we call tenacity, but they have put that into retail size bags like this that does 1,000 square feet, or bags that do 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. So that's something kind of recently made its way onto the store shelf.
And I would say that that niche is for spring seeding. We don't have too many weeds in the fall, thank goodness,
Yes.
that are going to pop up. But if you're finding where you need to seed in the spring, that mesotrione product that David just mentioned is really kind of the home lawn industry standard for applying that at the same time as seeding your cool season grass, and it'll be a preventative for crabgrass and other summer annual grasses. So certainly if you're seeding in the spring, really emphasize using that mesotrione.
Okay.
In the fall, I feel like it's kind of optional.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, we had a few questions about focusing on like seeding a lawn and the process for that if you've got patches that are bad and you're not doing a full renovation. So I'm going to combine a couple
Mhm.
of those. The first question was how do you handle seeding if you have bare patches, but say 85% of the lawn is fine? Do you just seed the bare patches or do you go ahead and seed the full lawn?
Yeah, so it depends what type of labor you want to put into it. You could go through and if those patches, assuming you have a average size suburban lawn that's not massive, one thing you can do is use your hard rake from the garden as that dethatching tool. Go in, it's a little bit of elbow grease, but you can go in and rake out those areas with that hard rake and then overseed those areas. Um, if you haven't dethatched in a while, and want to invest in renting a dethatcher, you could go that way. But if you just want to do it locally like that, a hard garden rake will work the same.
Okay. Okay. And then the next question is related to mowing. So if you are seeding in an area that still has existing grass, how do you handle mowing once you seed? The question, yeah. So like if you mow weekly and then you spread
Yeah.
seed, what do you do?
Yeah, I would try to wait a little bit. Obviously, you don't want to get to where that grass is too long that you would have to scalp to bring it down, but I would, assuming you're mowing at 3 inches, you could wait till it's four and change to mow it before you really run into any issues with the 1/3 rule. If I'm mowing every week, I'd see if I could see if I could skip a week or skip a half a week and try to get that seed going. Wait as long as you can, but obviously you don't want to wait too long to where, the next time you mow is going to be an issue. So it's a judgment call.
Okay. Okay.
But
Um,
don't worry. I mean, the mower will run over there. It's not like you're ruining the seed by running over it, especially if it's been able to germinate and it's got just a little bit of a root on it. You're probably not ruining the seed by running over it.
okay. All right, we've got about 1 minute left, so we'll do one more question and then I'll let you all wrap up however you like to. So this is a question. This person specifically has big dogs, but I'm assuming this means heavy traffic, so I'll put it that way. I have big dogs in a medium-sized yard and trouble keeping grass. What do you think about micro clover lawns? So would you use a ground cover? I guess would be like a ground cover alternative, or do you have any recommendations for those heavy traffic
Yeah,
lawns?
so I'll say, and I'll let David weigh in on this too, but if you look at traffic tolerance, clover has less traffic tolerance than tall fescue does. And so remember what happens to clover in the winter. The plant is still there, but it largely defoliates. So the leaves aren't there and it gives you even less cover. So this is a tough situation with dogs in a medium-sized yard. But trying to aerify, average homeowner, I tell them to aerify every other year. Want to aerify and overseed every year. Try to throw a little bit of seed down in the spring. Trick is that if you do a pre-emergent, then you can't. Well, if you do tenacity, you can throw down that seed in the spring too. So really, I look at seeding as much as you can in the spring and the fall to get that density up. Airifying every year. Um, make sure that you're fertilizing at that 2.5 to the 3 pounds annually, twice in the fall and then once in the spring. So I really look at cultural practices to try to improve that area.
All right, that's great advice. Well, we are just now we're at 3:31. So everybody who still has questions, I'm sorry we're not going to be able to get to all of you today, but remember the plant clinic is happy to take your questions. You can call your store. David is always happy to take your questions. And I see Geoff's email right here. So Geoff, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you and David so that you all can close things up for the day.
Excellent. Well, a couple things. First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Geoff, for sharing taking time out of your busy day. I know school's in session and
Yeah.
you just had to break away from one class to get here. And we really, really appreciate your spending time with us today. And as Sally was saying, we're always here at the Plant Clinic at all 3 stores to help you with this. I'm also going to give you sort of a teaser that on September 21, it's a Sunday, we're going to have what we call a lawn care open house. But lawns are not always the answer. We recognize that. So you're talking about like heavily trafficked areas with dogs, and Geoff was talking about the limitations of grass or clover and stuff. What we're doing with this is we are going to have, I'll be leading discussions about lawns, traditional lawns and turf care. We're also going to have one of our perennial specialists talking to you about ground covers and paths and walks and areas of heavy shade or small areas or where dogs are running, where places where maybe there are better answers than what turf grass is. We're going to have one of our landscape specialists talk about as far as if it's something you want to hire a service to help you with. Another one of our people talking to you about soils, soil conditioners and all. So you'll get the announcement, but it's meant to be fun. It's also kind of recognize that all this is sort of customized to what your wants are, your needs are, the environment that you're in. And like I said, we're open. We'll talk about everything from clover to moss to a traditional lawn, whatever is on your mind. So put that on your calendar for September 21.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much, Geoff, for joining us. Just a quick reminder that recording will be available tomorrow. We had some questions about sharing it with friends who couldn't make it today. You are welcome to do that. And Geoff, again, thank you so much. And David, as always, thank you. Y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you so much.
All right, bye.
Bye.